There's always been, ever since the end of the First World War, a large interest within Belgium and abroad for this history. And so very soon, already in the 1920s, there were exhibitions about the Great War, and with lots of stuff coming from the battlefields and exhibits and showcases. And then at some point, the city took care of that. And in the 1960s and 70s, they had a museum, and then toward the end of the 1980s, they saw a decline, and they felt, well, we should do something else with this collection because it looks too old-fashioned, and so. And then they got the idea of the In Flanders Fields Museum, which was then from 1995 onwards, in 3 years' time, we had the concept and had it built and made here in the Cloth Hall, and it opened in 1998. And it was different as a museum in comparison to the others, because it no longer took just the objects of the war as the main driver of the museum, but it took the human experience as the center of the attention. The personal witness accounts, the human experience from all sides military, but also civilians and military. And that was very much the focus in the first permanent exhibition of the In Flanders Fields Museum. And now, 15 years later, we've done a new permanent exhibition because we felt that we had to bring in a few other stepping stones. The people are still at the center of this all because it's a story of the people. But you need more other stepping stones to get there, to get to that story. And that is because we have lost the generation of the First World War now. It was not a war of old men. It was a story of boys very often. And so we didn't want to lose that aspect. And the other thing was that the old men to the present day young generation don't have the same meaning as they have for people of my generation who knew them. And so because of the change in generations, we felt that we had to use other devices, like we bring again in more objects, but also we felt that the present day landscape, what remains of the war, can be an important tool to get in a very authentic way related to the history. Whereas for us, for our people, when I grew up, I knew these veterans, I knew the civilians in the village where I grew up who had been living there in the war. So that was my contact, my authentic contact, my meeting with that history. Now that that generation is gone, I feel that perhaps going to the places where all these stories happened is the authentic connection. It is the sense of a place, if you want, the genius of a place, as they call it sometimes, which has become much more important, just to reveal the authenticity of the human experience and what its impact is on today and on present day generations. I see now when, like for instance, there's been from the bombing of London, there's several tube stations now who had lots of victims, and I see now that they go back to build monuments there or memorial plaques there, and I think it's important because that will remain to reconnect to that event. Whatever happens, it's meant to reconnect future generations to that event. And I think that is the important thing. That's why we brought in the museum the present-day landscape as part of the scenography of this story. We cannot alter the story, we will not alter the story, but we shift back always to what you can still see, what you can still have as a reminder in the present-day landscape, because that's where people go. So after the museum visit, they go around. For instance, the personal stories that you get, that you're on your bracelet as you go through the museum, in the end, you can have them sent to your smartphone or to an email, or have them printed. And then at the bottom there will say, there's a reference to the present-day landscape, as an invitation, as it were, to go out and then see where the very virtual story told in a museum becomes very real and very often very tangible. Because if you have a story of a soldier who died in the war, and there's a reference to the place where he is buried or commemorated, then you have a grave to touch or a name to see, and all of a sudden you've crossed over 100 years just like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And especially with the cemeteries of the Commonwealth, that is so powerful, because as soon as they had 40 graves together, the Commission decided to build a cemetery there after the war. And so it goes back to the very origin of these graves. You have big collective graves and that were produced like that to say, look, this was an important battle, and so we brought all these graves together. But by and large, the most of the Commonwealth War Graves cemeteries are cemeteries that grew from one grave. So the story grows day by day, and you can feel that, you can see that, and so you reconnect with that day when the grave was being dug, and I think that's important, because that is the connection with history through a material way, if you want, and we need that now.
Ask you a question about the research centre here. This is an organic place.
Yes, it is.
It's growing all the time. And
it is growing.
How does it function on a kind of weekly?
Oh, it functions day by day now. From Monday to Friday we're open, and it's at the very end of the exhibition. So after you've seen, you come down the stairs, and you feel that you have something more to ask most of the time about a local story or about a personal, a family story. Then you can come, and there's always at least one historian here who will try and help you with answering your question. And that is it has become very important. Some people come here and know very, very little about maybe a name and maybe a date, and it's very vague, but then it's quite easy to help, because you can still give them a lot of resources to work from. Sometimes they're great specialists, and then it's something, the questions can be very, very, very trying. but still we try. We cannot always help, but in most time, with the local knowledge we have about the war, the way it was fought here in this part of the Western Front, we can most of the time help, even with quite detailed questions. And in consequence, people stay in touch very often. Means of communication are much more easy than they were before. So there is email exchange as well, and then later on we see that people who have been customers for over the years, then in the end they say, well, I've finished my research, I've done my job, and I want you to have a copy.
Yeah.
And as such, the number of personal stories here are like growing every week. We have catalogued now more than 2,500 already. Today we have even more means of trying to do that. Last week there came one who said, my great uncle is on the Manning Gate, and he died on this particular day, and this was the area where he went missing. And we believe now that there were a few burials there, and so we wonder if you would know anything about that area. And so that he had a temporary grave, and then, which was then, because of later events in the war, lost. And so we sat down at the computer where we have all the aerial photographs, and we were something out like, we had an aerial photograph, a beautiful, clear shot of that area, something like a week later to the events. And the man's immediate reaction was, he is in the photo. And yes, I agree, he is in the photo. Especially from that bird's eye view you have with an aerial picture, you can actually believe that this is the war still happening beneath you. And what this man was saying was honest and very, very sincere, that it feels as if he had been so close to his great uncle, closer than he could ever become. He was in the photo. He is in the photo, sorry. It's a permanence because the photo is still there.
I've got one last question, and that's that we're approaching this this commemoration, which means many different things to many different people. What does it mean to you?
I think it would be a big mistake to stay with just the national commemoration. Some newspaper said it's time to remember our victories, and I'm quite shocked when reading that, because no matter what it was a catastrophe for the whole of mankind. So we should be able to do better than that. And if we stay on with just remembering the victories, then that's not going to help. So that is one thing. And the other thing, which is certainly the case, the world has become, in over a century's time, a lot smaller. Means of communication, means of traveling, and also of people looking for new lives and new opportunities elsewhere, has become much, much bigger than a century ago. So we share a lot of history with people who have newly arrived from other places in the world. And this is, I think, an opportunity for us to exchange that shared experience and to build on that. And I'm not just inventing this. I met this guy who came from Pakistan, who has in Antwerp a pizza place, and who came to Ypres and who saw his exact same name on the Manning Gate, and who was quite shocked by it, and who immediately said when he then came here and discovered this story, I can now say that my ancestors also did something for Belgium. So all of a sudden he became someone because of that. Rather than being a newly arrived immigrant who had to start at the bottom of the ladder, no, he was somewhere who had meant something before already. And this is the case for so many people who are new to our communities today. We are in a different world than a century ago. So we could use that part of our history to share it with newcomers and take a benefit of that. And I think in the end it's all sense-giving. when you're confronted day in, day out with 600,000 dead, as such, that's more than you should be exposed to in any human terms. You still are looking for a sense. Why is this here? And why I am confronted to this? And why can't I close my eyes to this? So all of that is why I'm doing it.
It's more than a city, isn't it? It has international importance, and you are twinned with Hiroshima, is that right?
We're not really twinned with it, but we are both cities who had a similar experience, completely destroyed by events of war, and as a result, as a consequence of acts of war, and arisen like a phoenix from the ashes. Both cities feel that they have to raise their voices in international debates about war and peace in the world, because I think both cities truly believe that their witness account can help to create a more peaceful world. And they have found each other it was the mayor of Hiroshima taking that initiative of taking what I would call a grassroots movement of peacemaking. It is you organize mayors throughout the world who say, well, if ever it would come again to another war, please feel free to do so, but not on the territory where I'm the mayor of. So if every city in the world would do that, then war is over.